Welcome to West Country Wanderings and welcome back to the Severn Way, 7A, 17A. Why the A? Well, we're not actually doing a walking one as such today. I thought I'd take some time out to explore this wonderful city of Worcester right on the River Severn, right next to Sabrina, of course. I'll tell you a little bit about the history of this fabulous city, give you some shots around the city and give a bit of background to why this settlement started here on the River Severn and what happened as the city developed and grew as well. Next time on Severn Way 18, we'll be heading south from here to the town of Upton upon Severn. Hope to film that over the next few days. But today, just sit back, grab a cup of tea or coffee, a biscuit, and just wonder at this lovely Severnside city here on West Country Wanderings. So how did Worcester start? Well, the first settlement started around Neolithic times, and the Romans came here. Of course, the Romans came here. Why did they come here? Well, below Worcester, the River Severn becomes tidal. So there was a ford crossing hereabouts, and it enabled them to get from here, from this side of the River Severn, over towards the Welsh marches, and then across further on into Wales, going through Herefordshire, of course, that way. And the reason they also settled here is because they could bring up charcoal up River Severn from nearby the Forest of Dean in the western part of Gloucestershire. So the town embryonically grew as it was then, town obviously city now, and we'll come on to that later on. So I just got a couple of swans going past me there, just distracts me, just a little bit out of shot. You can't fish here by this bank of the River Severn because it is known as a swan sanctuary. So fishing by the Severn throughout most of this section as we go through the city is completely verboten, and we'll see some more swans as we head further south. Managed to get myself a tea, which is always good. After the Romans settled here, well, they expanded the medieval times, and they went on further down to Sidbury. But Sidbury started to silt up, as often these ports do, and they concentrated in the centre that you have today. Later on, they expanded into the medieval times, and you had the further settlements. The first bridge here was not until the 11th century, so much later, which was a wooden affair not far from where we're currently standing, and the first stone bridge started around the 13th century, and we'll have a look at the bridges that you have in existence later on in today's video. What I'm intending to do is follow the Severn Way down to Diglis Locks and Diglis Basin, where of course it meets up with the Worcester and Birmingham Canal, and then I'll restart part number 18 as we head down towards the town of Upton upon Severn. So behind me here is Worcester Bridge, most famous bridge in Worcester, and there's been a bridge around about this. So the old medieval bridge was just about 100 metres or so north of here. This has always been a key bridge because for some time it was the only bridge in this area. The next nearest bridge was at Gloucester, 25 miles to the south, and at Bridgenorth, which we've seen previously, about 25-30 miles to the north of here. This bridge was actually built by one John Gwynn from Shrewsbury. It was opened in 1781. However, it had to be widened in 1931 to cope with the increased traffic, of course, and it was opened by the then Prince of Wales. Now, although the Romans brought up the charcoal from the Forest of Dean, as we've mentioned previously, it wasn't until the latter part of the 19th century that the River Severn was made navigable between here and further down at Gloucester. Around about 1872, the works on that were completed and also extended north up to, as we've seen, Stourport on Severn, where you have various locks between Stourport and Gloucester to make the river fully navigable for bigger craft. Before that though, Severn trows were used, which are kind of a flat bottom boat and they were used to bring goods into the city and take them out as well. And those Severn trows, of course, were also used on the Thames and Severn Canal to take them across to Stroud, where they could then go on from the West Midlands through to the southern part of the Cotswolds and thence on to the capital, London. I do apologise if you can hear a tannoy in the background. It's county match cricket day today. Worcestershire are playing. I don't know who they're playing, but yeah, that's from the ground, which is literally just behind the camera here. And what's all fact, I've crossed over the bridge there, so the city is on that side, and we're going to head down towards what is opposite side and then cross over the river again, should I say, and make our way into the city centre via the canal. That's the plan, to show you around that. In terms of our story of the history of the city, continued into the 7th century, when this part of the world was then taken over by the Angles of Mercia. Now, the Angles of Mercia called the city Weogoma. Later on, it became a settlement for the Saxons too, and they retitled it Weogoma Sicestra, which means Worcester Camp. Now, the Weogorans, as they became known, were a sub-tribe of the Wyche, that's H-W-I-C-C-E. We've come across them before, and they occupied most of Worcestershire, most of Gloucestershire, and a lot of Wiltshire as well. In 680 AD, Worcester was chosen to be their fortification place, which was strange because neighbouring Gloucester at that time was much larger. Later on, Worcester became a seat of monastic learning, an important religious centre as well. Oswald of Worcester was appointed bishop here in 961 AD. It's also worth noting that the city became a centre of riots against the Danish, against their tax reforms, and they tried to blockade the river, where we saw it earlier on as I made my way following the Severn Way into Worcester at Bevere Island. They put a blockade on both sides of the two bits of the river there to completely stop the Danish. Now, this part of the city is an important swan nature reserve between the railway bridge, where I started today's video, and opposite the cathedral. As I say, it's restricted access in terms of fishing, and it's a swan community. The offspring, which are then hatched in the spring months, they start setting up their nests around the winter months. They will stay here before several years, but going on to further new communities. But also the adults look after the disabled swans and also the elderly swans as well. So I'm currently in delightful Bromwich Park. I think that's how it's pronounced because there's a West Bromwich. So I'm thinking that's probably how it's pronounced, but it's wonderful wildflowers here to do as well. And it's good to see people out enjoying themselves. The Severn Way, in fact, is on the opposite side of the river, just underneath the cathedral. But we will head into the city centre a little bit later in today's video. This point here is the Monarch's Way, which we've come across many times, of course, here on the channel. And I'll tell you more about the Monarch's Way because it is in Worcester where the Monarch's Way starts. So this here is Chapter Meadows, just off the Monarch's Way and the Worcestershire Way as well. And the grass here is cut for hay, but also cattle graze here as well. You probably think it's quite odd having meadows right in a city. Well, the reason for that, of course, is because this is part of the River Severn's floodplain, and you wouldn't be able to build properties here, not unless you wanted to get up in the morning and find that your kitchen is completely underwater. Fortunately, Worcester, like many of the places that we've come across on the Severn Way, like Bewdley, Bridgnorth, and what we will see further down in Tewkesbury and Gloucester, have all been prone to flooding in recent years. Now, these two signs ahead of me aren't road signs. We're not on some kind of weird road. Those signs are tilted out towards the river, and of course therefore craft heading down the River Severn to alert them to the fact there is a weir ahead. Yes, we're coming up to the Diglis Basin, and there you can see marked the weir, which is on the right, so the craft have to keep on to the left-hand side. Now, I do need to point this out. This is Diglis Fish Pass, and it was installed in 2021. Now, as John Timbrell reminded me, there's 4 of these on the River Severn, including one at Holt. But unfortunately, the one at Holt is very, very inaccessible. Do you remember we had trouble there crossing the narrow and very busy bridge? And what was it? Thomas Telford's bridge, wasn't it? Across the River Severn there. And yes, and it also rained. It was very, very difficult filming there. But here, yeah, this is Diglis Fish Pass. Tell you a little bit more about it. So that there is Diglis Weir. And normally that would prevent an obstacle for the fish. Now, what sort of fish? Well, it's rare migratory fish that need to go upstream, up the river, up along the length of Sabrina to spawn. And this weir, which was created when the river became navigable, as we said, in the latter part of the 19th century, provided an immobile barrier to block their access. Apologies for the fence in the way, obviously for security reasons and safety reasons there's a fence here. But what happens, you have rare fish like twait shad, I'll put in the spelling of that below, which come from the sea. They swim up the Bristol Channel all the way, going past places like Weston-super-Mare, up towards Bristol, well, not quite into Bristol, Avonmouth, and up the River Severn to here, and they would have then become stuck. Well, they would have become stuck a bit lower down at Tewkesbury and Gloucester as well. And they couldn't get any further to their spawning grounds. But now you have these, one of the 4. I think this is the second lowest. So you had, I think Holt is the first one, and one at Tewkesbury and Gloucester, I do believe. That's wrong, I'll put it in below. And enables them to go upstream. So if you see that barrier there, the metal barrier, like a rusty metal barrier, the fish can actually swim up this side of it, so closer to the camera, and enables them to get upstream. Amazing. So I didn't think I'd be able to get this close to the Diglis Fish Pass, so there it is, John. Diglis Fish Pass. I've managed to be able to include that. I've also just met a couple of subscribers, which was brilliant, so really nice to meet you. And also met some other people asking me if I were interested in birds. They'd just seen a heron, and they said it was a white heron. I said it's probably a large egret, because I've seen egrets as well on the River Severn, so that was good to see as well. So yeah, it's great. Wonderful walk down this way. Now, if I was just doing the Severn Way, I wouldn't have seen any of what we've seen from Worcester Bridge at all, because we're on the opposite side of the river. And there we're going to head over across Diglis Bridge, and there we'll be heading up the towpath of the Worcester and Birmingham Canal. At the end of the last Severn Way, number 17, when we finished in Worcester, the northern part of the city, we saw the Sabrina Bridge, which was built in the 1990s. And this is Diglis Bridge, perhaps the newest bridge. I think it is the newest bridge across the River Severn. It was opened in 2010, thanks to funding from Worcestershire County Council, the National Lottery's Big Lottery Fund, and also Sustrans as well. Well, as you can see, the weather has changed a little as we got to Diglis Bridge. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to film on the bridge, but I'll include some of that as we head south on the Severn Way next time, because of course we'll be following the river on that side. I'm here at Diglis Basin. We've been here before because a couple of times, I think I did a little bit when I was here at Worcester Cathedral to do a Christmas special, and also when I did my chocolate and canals video. I tied up and talked about the connection to Cadbury's chocolate, both Bournemouth here at Blackpool in Worcester, and also at Frampton-on-Severn in Gloucestershire as well. Check that out if you've not already seen that video. We're going to head on now to what's known as the Commandery, which is right next to the lock. Can't remember the name of the lock actually, right in the heart of the city centre. There's a little garden there as well. I'll tell you a bit more about the connection to the English Civil War and Worcester there. Now I've come round to the Commandery. In fact, I'm in the grounds of the Commandery, which is right next to Sidbury Lock on the Worcester and Birmingham Canal, just up from the Diglis Basin as you make your way back into the city centre. Unfortunately, it's still raining, but I'm under this delightful cedar tree, so I thought I'd tell you a little bit about the Civil War and Worcester. Now, Worcester has devoutly been a parliamentary town, but in 1642 the city became occupied by the Royalists, and so began the Battle of Poik Bridge. Poik just lies a couple of miles to the south of the city centre from here. There is a bridge over the River Severn, old bridge over the River Severn. There is a newer one which forms like a bypass. Anyway, I digress. We'll see all that as we head south to the Severn Way. There was a ransacking of the cathedral. Many of the cathedral's stained glass windows were damaged and the libraries were ransacked, and so began the English Civil War here in Worcester in 1642. The Royalists continued to hold on to Worcester throughout the English Civil War, and many male residents were pushed into the Royalist army. There was a garrison established nearby, and it became a real stronghold during the war itself. In 1651, a Scottish army, some 16,000 strong, headed south along the west coast here to Worcester. They were trying to get Charles II back onto the throne. And in doing so, they forced out the parliamentarians to the nearby town of Evesham, somewhere we've been recently here on West Country Wanderings. I digress. Later on, there was a famous battle here. The Battle of Worcester took place on the 3rd of September 1651, and Charles II's forces were completely outnumbered by the parliamentarians and Cromwell's 30,000 strong army. This meant that Charles II hid in disguise. First, he went into a building in the city, what is now the current Corn Market. I'll see if I can find a shot of that. And later, as we know, he fled. He went down to the Sussex coast on a convoluted route, which is now mainly picked out using the present-day Monarch's Way long-distance footpath. And then he went on, leaving England's shores to France. As there's now a noisy lawnmower here, I'm going to head now into the city centre. I won't be appearing on camera for a bit. I'm going to show you some of the buildings and some of the history around the city before we conclude today's video in Cathedral Close by the famous cathedral. Now at the site of the former Royal Worcester Pottery Company, which was formed by Dr. John Waugh in 1751. Alas, it is no more, but it does still have a brilliant museum highlighting some of the fantastic pottery that was made here over the many years before closing. I think into this centre, I think it was just in the early 2000s. I'll put in the date below. I love these finger posts you have dotted around the city centre there with the pear on top. You have the apple for the nearby county of Herefordshire, but Worcestershire has the pear. You also have the Dyson Perrins Museum here as well. And Dyson Perrins, nothing to do with Dyson vacuum cleaners, but it's the second word there, yes, Perrins, the famous Lee and Perrins sauce, better known as Worcestershire sauce. That, I think, was the main entrance to the Royal Porcelain Works there. So this is Edgar Tower, which I have featured when I did that Christmas special here at Worcester. As I'll close the video off at green, but there's more to see the city centre first. And here once lived Sir Edward Elgar, he of Land of Hope and Glory and the Enigma Variations fame, and probably Worcester's most famous son. And this is probably the most famous building in Worcester after the cathedral. It's the Guildhall. Now the Guildhall here was rebuilt in 1721 to replace an earlier one, a Queen Anne style building. But still magnificent it is. Just about to enter Worcester's oldest, most famous street, Friar Street, which is just down there. Now this here is Greyfriars, which is a National Trust property. You can purchase tickets to have a tour inside, but we'll have a quick look at the garden. So the garden itself is free to come into. They've also got a delightful courtyard cafe here as well, and the proceeds of that go to the upkeep of the garden and to the Tudor building, which is just behind me. And there it is, tucked away just off Friar Street in the centre of Worcester, though you wouldn't think it as I stand here in this beautiful and most delightful garden. Lovely. Well, I need to wrap the video up, so I need to continue along Friar Street and head back to Cathedral Close, so let's do that. And this here is Laslet's Almshouses, which were actually restored in 2012, I believe, to celebrate Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee. Now, this end of Friar Street, you have the Tudor House Museum, which is run and managed by Worcestershire County Council. It has free admission as well. Now, there's lots of things that I haven't been able to cover about this tour of Worcester today here on Severn Way, but I'll just give you a couple of facts. The oldest newspaper in the world, One Barrow's Weekly Journal, which is still in existence, it's now a free weekly newspaper, was founded right here in Worcester in 1690, some 333 years ago. The reason for that is because Worcester had one of the first printing presses that were in existence. I'm not sure how it came here, but yes, Barrow's Weekly Journal, oldest newspaper in the world. That's amazing. It's a fact I didn't know until I was doing the research for the video here today. The other amazing fact I managed to uncover was that when I was at school in or near Stroud, we used to play rugby. Yes, I played rugby for a bit. Yeah, can you believe? I know. I did for a little while. And we used to play lots of the schools in the area, including Worcester Grammar School, still in existence. And one of the pupils of Worcester Grammar School was one Imran Khan. Yes, he, the Prime Minister of Pakistan, of course, known for his cricketing. Perhaps he played for Worcestershire County Cricket as well. I'm not sure. I think he probably did. But he attended Worcester Grammar School right here in Worcester, and now, as I say, Prime Minister of Pakistan. No, I didn't play rugby with him because he's about 10 or 12 years older than me. But I digress. I just thought I'd drop that fact in because it blew my mind when I saw that when I was researching today's video. We will come back to Worcester again because there's so much more to be able to see. I'd like to go around the Commandery. I'd like to go around that Tudor House Museum. And I also want to devote an entire video just to the cathedral, which I haven't showed you today, but which is where I'm going to pop into next to go into their lovely tea room there, and that's a really nice place just to chill out at the end of filming. We will continue along the River Severn, along the mighty Severn Way, following the longest river through England and Wales as we head south to the town of Upton-on-Severn, which is smaller than Worcester, but also an equally delightful place. I hope you enjoyed the tour today here in Worcester. Until next time on West Country Wanderings, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, and I hope to see you on the channel again very, very soon. All the best for now. Bye-bye.